Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter. That, of course, is Tim.
It's a pleasure.
What an intro as always. This is our top 10 horror movies of 2019. This is a horror movie podcast, of course. This is our top 10 of the year. Why are we doing this at the end of March? Because we always take a couple months at the start of the year to catch up on stuff that we missed. Sometimes we couldn't get to the theaters for certain movies, so they don't come out in VOD till January or February or whatever. Anyway, some just kind of come out late for some of us, so we get a bit of time to catch up, and we're now here to do our top 10 horror movies. This is a combined list. Me and Tim sat down, we debated, we discussed what ones we wanted to put there, we argued for our cases, and in some cases one of us fought for one more than the other. But this is the Screams After Midnight top 10 horror movies of 2019. So here we go. Number 10 is the Child's Play remake, of all things. Tim fought for this more than I did, so I'm going to let Tim explain his reasoning.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised by this one because I think everything leading up to it was like, yeah, this is gonna suck. Like, yeah, especially the big thing, having the original creator not really be on board and down with this, especially when we still have the original timeline, still going on. And then just everything you hear about it, like, oh, it's Chucky, but he's gonna be like upgraded and like modern and stuff, and it's very eye rolly when you hear that, but when you sit down and watch it, it's actually surprisingly a ton of fun. Like, there's definitely points where it could have been better, but the characters are very likable. It's a pretty fun premise. I actually find interesting things to do with, like, the technology angle. Honestly, I think the biggest thing that hurts it is calling it Child's Play. Like, it easily could have just been whatever random, like Robo Doll movie, and I think that would have given it like a lot less like scorn from like horror fans and stuff.
Yeah, I also don't think. See if you obviously you have to change the name of the characters, obviously, but like, right, yeah. I don't think if you called this something else, anyone would be saying, "Oh, this is a Chucky ripoff."
No, not at all.
I don't think anyone would say that. So you totally could just get away with like changing some names. Obviously, change the look of the doll so it doesn't look like Chucky. That's the main thing. But like, and some of the kills are kind of fun. That was the surprising thing, is that this was a fairly entertaining movie. It's weird because the original timeline, like you say, is still going on. We're getting that TV show from Sci-Fi that's continuing the original movies with Brad Dourif as Chucky and Don Mancini writing the show, and he wrote all the other original movies. But on its own, it's kind of a fun time. It's not perfect. I definitely think there could be a few more kills, or I think the pacing could be a little bit better in the back half. But yeah, surprisingly kind of entertaining and fun. So fair play.
Who do?
Our number 9 is Nightmare Cinema, anthology movie from 2019, which has Mickey Rourke as honestly kind of the useless host of it. He kind of in the sort of the wraparound segments. But what is good in the movie is the stories themselves. Usually with anthology movies, I find that there's like one or two good stories and then some mediocre ones and maybe like a really bad one. This is notably pretty strong in this regard. It has one that I don't like, but the other 4 are all really enjoyable, and 4 out of 5 for an anthology is actually very good. So I can't fault that. Some really fun story, because I think it had to win me over. The first story starts off kind of weird, and it feels like kind of off, but then by the time you get to the twist, it's like, oh, okay, I get what it was doing there. That's actually kind of witty. And then the stories after that are kind of different. There's kind of a almost old school Twilight Zone kind of one in the like a plastic surgery office where someone's like sort of getting worried that they're not doing what they're supposed to her. There's one that's in black and white that's kind of like psychological about a mother trying to like find her kids. There's all these different types of stories, and they're mostly pretty enjoyable. So yeah,
I really like an anthology movie, and I do feel like there's probably more bad ones than good ones at this point, but yeah, when you can kind of nail it, it's great. And yeah, I think with the exception of one of the stories here, and unfortunately, I think the idea for the wraparound is really good, but they don't like really. I think they try to like explain it like too much in the movie. Like, it would have been good if you kind of just have this person showing these movies to people that just randomly walk in, but then it kind of tries to be too much of a thing. But yeah, I don't think I was like expecting a ton, and then when I sat down and like you said, like the first story is really good, and I was like, oh wow, like all right, this is pretty cool, but all right, let's see what the next one is. But then yeah, it kind of just keeps going. Like next one's like this one's actually really good too. Like, and yeah, and like you said, like they're all like pretty different. Like yeah, it's not just like kind of the same thing over and over again. Like you get like some interesting like serious stuff, and then you also get like some just really fun like over the top stuff, and then some like yeah really comedic stuff. And yeah, this is definitely one I'll be coming back to. I feel like it's a good I think especially like around October for Halloween rewatches, I always like doing anthology movies, and that's probably one I'll check out again.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things there is that they are so like one is like really kind of serious and psychological, one's kind of lighthearted, one's kind of meta and satirical, one's like they kind of jump around in terms of those tones, and which an anthology should do to an extent, unless you're going
Yeah.
for like a theme. But in this case, I think that's to its benefit. So
Totally.
Nightmare Cinema number 9. Number 8 is The Perfection. This was a wacky movie that went on to Netflix, starring Logan Browning and I can't remember her name, the chick from Get Out. But they're on a trip, or well, not even a trip. They're like musicians, but they end up spending time together in I think was it Japan, and one of them ends up getting sick, and I can't really tell you the plot beyond that because honestly the plot goes in such insane places. There's twists and turns all throughout this movie to the point where you would never guess what the last like 30 minutes would be when you start the movie off, or if I told you like how it starts. It goes off in some really insane directions that, I mean, it's a wild ride. If nothing else, I think that's why it's so memorable, is that it goes in places where it does these extreme left turns that are like, oh, that's interesting. And then even once it kind of reveals what it's doing, you can kind of see some of it coming. The ending's pretty like memorable as well, pretty over the top and insane. I can't even say what its genre it really is, what subgenre it really is, because that would spoil something. Because you've got no reason to suspect that that's what the movie is until like at least halfway through. So I'll just say it's a wild ride and good performances, and go from there.
It's funny because you mentioned the thing about the virus, which obviously feels a little relevant now, but I totally forgot that that was a component of the movie because everything that happens after that is like so much more memorable. But yeah, no, this one's a wild ride. I think it's super fun. I love all the performances. Steven Weber, I think, is so good at what he does. I guess I'll save it for for people that haven't seen it yet. But yeah, his character was really well done. And yeah, this was it's like really fun, a lot of stuff. And then like you said, the the ending, very memorable to say the least.
Mm-hmm. So yes, just don't go in knowing anything, just go for it and enjoy the ride. That is number 8, The Perfection. Number 7 is Crawl. We have a alligator movie here, where there's a storm in Florida. An alligator is trapped in a house with people who are trapped in a basement, and it's about they're supposed to be evacuated, but they're not. This is kind of my perfect. It felt like a throwback to like a 90s movie, except that it actually has obviously. I mean, the CG is not amazing, like it's not great effects, but obviously it's better than what you could have done in the 90s, and I feel like it has that kind of vibe. But it's just like, it's my favorite thing about these movies is trying to problem solve. Okay, can I do this to distract the alligator so I can get to this thing? Well, it's a phone, or whether it's a key, or whether it's a whatever. It's a pure survival movie. And I think as a horror movie, it's a really fun time. It's a couple of really good jumps, actually. I don't usually say that about jump scares, but there's a couple of good ones in this that I think really work. So I would describe it as a really fun time that is, again, not like a serious psychological horror movie by any means, but as a monster movie and a survival movie, it has a lot of fun stuff going for it.
Totally. I'm actually bummed that I didn't get to see this in theaters because it feels like kind of the ultimate like popcorn movie. Like this is something that feels like a crowd could really get into, and yeah, it's just a ton of fun. What I love is it does sound like it should be inherently silly, but it doesn't actually really feel like when you're watching it. Like it's like the characters are all taking it very seriously, and they're playing it out like like what would you really do? And like you said, it feels very methodical, almost like a video game or something where like you have an objective, and you'll clear something, but then some new obstacle will come in your way, and you have to find out a way to overcome that. But it's very satisfying watching watching them do this. And then yeah, I agree, like the CGI isn't always the best, but I think there's also some times though where it does look like really impressive and cool. And yeah, this is a lot of fun again.
Yeah, no, I look at this was just an entertaining time from start to finish. It was a really easy watch, and I think this came like right after a couple of movies that were like 2.5 hours long. It was really nice to get a 90-minute, tightly paced movie that didn't waste any time and just did exactly what it's supposed to do. And I miss like horror movies and sci-fi movies that are just their simple premise, their simple gimmick of like, no, it's an alligator in a house with people. Like, okay, let's do that during the flood.
Yeah,
let's do that. Yeah, great idea. Just do it and do it to the best of your ability. And I feel like that's what the movie does. So, good stuff.
And it feels nice to see a movie like that gets like, like obviously not like, it's not like $1 billion movie or whatever, but it is treated like a an actual movie, and was in theaters and stuff, like, versus I feel like a lot of times you get these kind of wacky premises, but it's like such a low budget straight to VOD thing that doesn't really like live up to it all the time. So it feels like this one, although very silly, like was actually given like a lot of care and stuff towards making it like good.
Yeah, it was treated with a bit more respect by the studio and given some money in advertising, and crawls a solid time, surprisingly so even. So that takes on to number 6, which is one that Tim really fought for. I mean, I would have probably still had it in the top 10, but Tim really argued it up a few slots, and that was Doctor Sleep. Doctor Sleep, of course, is the sequel to The Shining, but it's also an adaptation of a book called Doctor Sleep, which was a sequel to the book The Shining. It's a really convoluted... Tim, you explain it. You explain the thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously everyone knows I'm a big King fan, and last year, unfortunately, was a little more depressing for some of the adaptations. I was hopeful for some, and they just kept not living up to my expectations. But then luckily, Mike Flanagan just knocked it out of the park with this. So I think what's really interesting and impressive about it is, Stephen King has famously said that he hates, the Stanley Kubrick Shining, even though many horror fans, like love it, consider it one of the best movies out there. But it does take some wild departures from the book. And then, in whatever year, 20 something or whatever, he writes Doctor Sleep, which is a sequel to the book. And then, Mike Flanagan does this movie, and he has to find a way to, make a faithful adaptation to the book, but also find ways to make it as a sequel to, the original movie, which, again, is different from the book. And I was really impressed that he was able to pull it off. Like, it is not an easy task at all, but he made something that I think is really entertaining, interesting. It is long. I'm sure some people probably complain about that, but I mean, for me, I love the ride. I'm very enthralled the whole way through. But I mean, it's probably not what people would expect a Shining sequel to be. The main thrust of it is these like psychic vampires that are feeding off of people that have like the Shine ability, and then Danny from the Shining is grown up now and has to kind of protect this like girl that has the ability. But so it does sound pretty weird, like when you kind of put it in that context, but it totally works for me, and I absolutely love it. I got the Blu-ray and watched the like 3+ hour director's cut, and was still very much enthralled by it.
Oh dear. I like the movie. I do think it is a bit long, and I do think there's stuff that I'd cut at the start, and I do think the ending's a little bit fan servicey, but I do think when it's doing its own thing, when it's doing the psychic vampires, when it's doing, okay, Danny teams up with this girl to try and take on this evil group of psychics, like that stuff I actually really like. I think when it's doing that, it's really well directed. Mike Flanagan knows how to direct and write a compelling movie, and I feel like that stuff is really solid. So when it's doing its own thing and it's not trying to be a sequel to The Shining, I think it's at its best. I do think there's a couple of things that sort of drag it a bit lower for me, but Tim loved it, and it is good in a lot of places. So that's number 6.
Yeah, really good performances too. Like, Ewan McGregor is great. I love the person that plays the villain, Rose the Hat. She's phenomenal. But Yeah, I mean, obviously, I understand. I have a King bias, and like I think the people that like this, are probably more big Stephen King fans. So I get that, but you know, hey, you got to give me something in a year that had uh, some of the other King adaptations we've seen. It's nice to have at least something to cling to.
Number 5 is Us, Jordan Peele's follow-up to Get Out, came out this year, and it's another solidly well-made movie. I mean, I do think it's a step down from Get Out. Admittedly, Get Out was, of course, like a complete knockout of the park. But once again, this is another one that Tim probably liked a bit more than I did. I mean, I think it's really well done, full of creepy, effective moments. But I do think it's a bit uneven, whereas Tim, once again, is the champion of the movies that I maybe under appreciate, I guess. I don't know.
I don't. No, I mean everyone has their opinions. I think I've heard a lot of people with like similar takes on it. And I don't know. For me, this is right up there with Get Out. Like I honestly, I don't know if I can really pick one more than the other, but I absolutely love this. I think it is a great premise. I love the performances, or I should say like dual performances, like because a lot of people are playing two characters, and it's just got like a great tone, and again, like I mean, obviously Jordan Peele knows what he's doing, so it's like the cinematography and the music, like everything about it just works for me. And I think some people have this complaint like about the lore and mythology that he sets up, but I like it. I think it's like a very interesting thing that he's establishing here. I don't know if I need a sequel or need it to be explored more, but I think it kind of just gives you enough to really make it interesting, make you think about it. I think maybe if you think about the logic too much, you can kind of go down a wormhole, but it worked for me.
Yes, the sequel will be called The Last of Us.
Oh.
I kid. No, it's a very effective movie. I think the creepy moments are handled very well. I do think there are some plot holes in the mythology that I mean I couldn't help but sort of notice, especially towards the end. And I thought it was weird that they treated something as a twist, because I thought it was like really obvious from the opening what was going on. But other than that, it's really well done, really well directed.
I mean, I disagree with that. I mean, obviously, again, people kind of bring their own feelings and stuff to it, because I have had other people with a similar complaint where they didn't like it because they kind of guessed the ending, but I don't know. It didn't feel like a gotcha twist to me. It just feels like something that's happening in the movie. Like it doesn't feel like it's being played to be like, hey, surprise, guess what? Like, I don't know. But I mean, again, that's just my feelings on it. So maybe that's why something worked better for me. But
maybe. But that is number 5 with Us. Number 4 is Depraved. This is an interesting little indie movie, a modern take on Frankenstein, directed by Larry Fessenden. This is about a guy who is actually murdered quite clearly at the start of the film, and his brain is used in the Frankenstein creation. And the movie is about him kind of learning to be a person and learning to do things. The scientist is kind of like teaching him how to do certain things, interact with people, how to play games, so on and so on. But of course, he does have kind of flashes of memory of like who he used to be. So it's kind of this kind of tragic, almost a little bit romantic movie, and it's got this kind of sadness to it. But it's really well done. I think the movie impressed me with kind of this very melancholic take of the, because I think one of the things that Frankenstein, the classic Frankenstein, never really did was the idea that I mean, I think there's like a joke in the first Frankenstein where instead of taking the healthy brain, they take the criminal brain. So that may be why it's a little bit unhinged. But I don't think it really explores the idea of like, who the person was, where the brain came from, is actually a factor in who the final creation is, right? That parts of that are kind of seeping through. But the whole thing plays like a tragedy, and it's really kind of bittersweet the whole time. And you're rooting for the monster, and you know that things are going to go bad, and there's the human characters that you're not sure if you should root for them. There's definitely one that you don't want to root for at all, and I love how theatrical it plays it. There's some moments in the third act where everything's going down, and like there's like a thunderstorm, so that you actually see like the monster like walking through the rain, and like lightning will strike, and you'll see like a flash of light, and I don't know, everything about it just felt so operatic by the time it got to the end, which I think stood out because it was so indie and melancholic throughout, that once it starts going really kind of like it's Frankenstein now, it kind of it merged together really well, and became an experience.
Yeah, everything was really effective in it, and I think this one was kind of a surprise because, yeah, I think we had both heard like good things about it, but it still wasn't one that like everyone was saying, "Hey, drop what you're doing and watch this movie." We were just kind of like, "Oh, hey, this is out now. We should check it out." And I think we were both like pretty like, "Oh, wow, like no, this is like really good." And yeah, it's just everything is just done like really spot on, and like the I remember like some of the like effects for like when they're showing him like kind of like learning and like remembering stuff, and you kind of see these like synapses like going off in his brain. It was just like really cool, interesting way to take this story that I feel like we haven't really seen a good version of since like what, 40 something 1930 40, whatever the original was.
1931. Oh, some people, I mean, people like the Hammer version from like 58 or whatever it is, but
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that one. But I mean, just thinking like the last like ones we got, like the Robert De Niro one, or that like I Frankenstein one. Like I feel like we haven't gotten a good or Victor Frankenstein or whatever. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, it wasn't another one after that looked bad. Yeah, Victor Frankenstein was the last one, then I Frankenstein was before. Like, that was the one with Aaron Eckhart, right? And it was like an action. Oh yeah. Oh, it's been a rough time for Frankenstein.
No, like this is how you do a like a modern like take on Frankenstein.
Hell, even the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer had a kind of mediocre Frankenstein episode.
Oh
so
yeah.
some assembly required. Season 2.
Yeah. But no, this is like very, very solid. I would say pleasantly surprised by this one.
Yeah, that's Depraved. Number 3 is One Cut of the Dead. Now, this is a movie that technically will be labelled as 2017, but it is a movie that didn't come widely available to everyone else until this year. And I've relaxed the rules a little bit. If a movie didn't become available to everyone until we want to champion it. We want to say if a movie's good enough to be on the top 10, we want to say, hey, go check it out. One Cut of the Dead is kind of a horror movie. It is kind of a comedy. It's kind of a lot of things. The problem with One Cut of the Dead is the reason why everyone likes it, we can't talk about it because it is a complete spoiler. Because people watch this movie and they watch the first half hour and they say, this is kind of a bad horror movie, what's happening? And we know that. But trust us. Trust us to stick with it, because that's kind of the point. And the only thing I'll say is that this movie is maybe for just as much for fans of movie making as it is as fans of horror movies. And as a horror fan who also is a fan of movie making, this is
it's great.
Yeah, this is a treat to behold. But it's very witty, it's very playful, and by the end of it, you just get a big smile on your face. It's kind of wonderful. So.
Yeah, no, it's really great. It's very unique. This is one I'd heard a couple of people talking about on podcasts, but it is very much the same. Like, all right, don't learn anything about it. Just go watch it. Like, stop listening right now. Make sure you're not spoiled. And it really is worth it, because when the thing happens that kind of makes you start looking at things in a new light, like especially nowadays when people are so spoiler heavy, and audiences are a little savvy to now as to a lot of times like where things are going. It felt great to have like a genuine like surprise at like, oh, okay. And yeah, I can't really think of any other movie that does this, where it really makes you reevaluate like the rest of the movie again. It's so I mean, on its own it's just a great movie, but then there's this added layer of a really interesting like hook and technique to it. That, and again, there's not like it's not something that's like has like any holes or anything. It's like it works like really well. But really can't recommend this enough. This is so fun. And then it's kind of weird for like the best horror list, but it's like, very sweet. Like it does, like you said, it does make you feel good. Like by the end of it, like you feel like happy and creative.
Yeah, one Cut of the Dead is very much worth checking out, and it's actually kind of unique on this list. This is the only movie in this top 10 that we haven't reviewed. We never did an episode on One Cut of the Dead. Right. We both saw it independently and just both liked it separately. So probably one day we'll get around to it. It feels weird to do it now, but yeah, one day we'll do One Cut of the Dead. But One Cut of the Dead is very good, and you should check it out. So number two for 2019 is Midsummer. Ari Aster back again after a year. He was in 2018's list with Hereditary, but he's here with Midsummer. And for me, this is the better of the two films. I think this is a better film than Hereditary, and Hereditary was really good already. But I think this is even more confident and even more is to its point from start to finish. All 2.5 hours of it, like from the get-go, it sets up some themes. It sticks to those themes. It is about a really normal event that happens to people all the time, but it turns it into a complete like tension-filled horror movie. So it's one of those things where social horror is kind of a weird thing to call it, but because that makes you think of social political horror. But
sure.
The reason why I call it social horror is because it basically turns like awkward normal situations into a horror movie in the same way that Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm turns awkward moments into comedy. This takes awkward social interactions and turns them into like terrifying moments that feel awkward, and you're like, oh my god, please end this now. And it's all building up to some sort of confrontation. Plus it has the balls to be the brightest movie ever but still be really tense and be a proper horror movie, and some intentional humor in there as well. I don't want to say what the movie's really about because again, it feels like a spoiler, and I want people to go watch it. But go check out a review if you want to hear us like talk in depth. We talked about that movie for like 2 hours. Like this was a in-depth discussion.
Yeah, you see, I'm the like opposite of you. I guess when
in every possible way.
But like the way you feel about like Get Out and Us is kind of how I feel about this. Like I still like Midsommar a lot, but I do still prefer Hereditary. I think that is the better movie, but not to say that there's anything wrong with it. Like this is still a fantastic movie. It looks great. Again, it has like a very interesting take on on something, and again, just man, yeah, the way he delivers like awkwardness and there's so much stuff that makes you squirm that's not even like the horror part of it. It's just the interactions between like some of the characters, but then when the horror stuff does happen though, it is really really good. So it's a really interesting year where we got like so many like sophomore follow-ups from like really notable horror directors. And
we got 3 of them, obviously one still to come. Not to spoil what number 1 is, but no, I think the direction is so confident. Like there's a great scene at the start where it's all from one shot, and it's when like the what's her face? Oh, I forgot her name. But
Florence Pugh.
Thank you, Florence Pugh. She comes over and it's all the guy and all of his friends, and they're just sort of like, it's this one wide shot of their apartment, and the entire thing is so awkward in a beautiful, like intentional way.
Yeah,
I think the filmmaking is exceptional, and I think it creates the mood that it exactly wants to, and I think it everything's to the point that it's trying to make, and very successful in doing so. So Midsommar is number 2, which leads us to number 1, which may not come as a surprise, but number 1 is The Lighthouse, which is perhaps the most unique, weird, bizarre experience. I can't say it's got the most sperm of 2019. There's definitely some other movies we saw.
Sure.
Girl on the Third Floor, which just missed the worst 10 list. That had a lot of semen in it. This has 2 semen plus a lot of sperm.
There you go.
Does The Lighthouse? No, I mean you've got Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe as the sort of the senior and junior lighthouse keepers, and this is a movie where they go delirious. It's black and white. It's 4:3. It's dark. Things happen that are making no sense. There's Lovecraftian horror elements. There's people going insane. there's this weird like marriage between them where they get angry at each other.
Yeah.
There's performances that are like erratic and memorable and just everything about it. And I can't necessarily say that I completely understand all of it necessarily, but
Yeah.
goddamn if I wasn't enthralled the entire time.
Oh yeah, I mean, it sounds like, like it's definitely not for everybody, and it sounds like something that might be torture, like for some people to watch. But man, I was like, so hooked, like, right from the start. Like, I mean, these two are just such good actors, and seeing them play off each other, and being these very like, specific characters, like you feel like you could just watch them all day. And yeah, just like the slowly creeping madness is so jarring and weird. And and what I like about, like, I would say kind of, this whole top three is all these movies, it's not just movies, like they also feel like experiences. Like, you feel like you go through an experience of madness with them, just like, in Midsummer, like, you feel like you're experiencing like the awkwardness, and then like, One Cut of the Dead, you're feeling kind of like the camaraderie and everything between the people. Like, it's these all just feel like really fun like journeys that you're going on with people. But yeah, this is like so weird, and no one else could like make this movie. It seems like such a, like, you get lucky and you have kind of like a slow burn horror hit that, you feel like what else are you gonna do? And then yeah, to be like, yeah, I want to make a black and white movie about like two lighthouse keepers slowly going insane. But man, I'm really glad that this exists.
It's a unique experience, and 2019. I think looking at this top 10, it's got it's definitely made up of two halves. Where the top half is all these weird, very different experimental movies, or very Lighthouse is very much in one direction. Midsummer's also an art house horror movie in a very different direction. One Cut of the Dead is this really unique sort of meta take on a horror movie, and then Depraved's this bittersweet indie drama. And then Us is kind of like a demented Twilight Zone episode. And it gets a bit more normal after that, but I feel like all of the traditional horror, for the most part, maybe you could say Crawl and Nightmare Cinema and Child's Play are the only traditional movies on this list. But I feel like most of the traditional stuff is the stuff that ended up in the middle. All the stuff that didn't make either list because they were just mediocre and they were just kind of doing whatever. I miss slasher movies. Like, we need some slasher movies, goddammit. Like, I feel like there's been none. But
I'm not even like, you're more of a slasher guy than me, but yeah, even I would like, some nice like throwback or something to that. Like,
I need someone just killing someone with some sharp objects, please. I want to enjoy it, damn it. But like, definitely the strength in 2019 is just inventive and weird, and like taking horror in new directions seems to be the most interesting thing that any of these movies are doing. So, hey, as far as the year goes, it's pretty solid. I mean, like any year, there's a lot of bad, there's a lot of mediocre. We're going to have that every year, but I'm glad that, for the most part, we were able to fill out a top 10 without feeling that we were struggling to fill it. I think, because there's definitely one or two. If we're going to do some honorable mentions here, I really like Lose, the German film. Tim hated it, which is why it's not on this top 10. But I would have had that at least a few slots into the top 10 if I was doing it on my own. I thought that, but again, that was an experimental art house, like, surreal horror movie kind of thing.
Yeah, I think for me, the one I really want to mention, which unfortunately I don't think it lives up to what we wanted, but I think it still deserves a mention, is the Headhunter, which again, it's it's a little too slow, and there's not as like much stuff that you kind of want in it, but it is really beautifully shot, and then on such a small budget, it's really impressive what they're able to do. And again, I like, kind of champion, like, some independent person who's trying to do their own thing, versus like you're talking about the kind of people just making the horror to make horror or whatever, that kind of just ends up being a little boring. But yeah, it's cool that we're seeing people doing like interesting stuff, especially on like really small micro budgets.
Yeah, so that is it. That is our top 10 of 2019. And it's worth mentioning, like, if you say, was it worth not doing this list until March? Well, yeah. I mean, if we'd done this at the end of December, we probably wouldn't have Depraved, and we wouldn't have The Lighthouse. So our number one movie wouldn't be there. So that's why we wait. We spend some time doing more movies. Same with the worst 10. There was definitely a few on that were from the last couple of months. So. By all means, let us know your top 10s of 2019 horror movie wise in the comments. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. You can get us on Twitter at ScreamsMidnight. Of course, we would like you to go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support the show and the channel and everything we do here. And you can, of course, give us $1 per month and get a bonus movie review episode of Streams After Midnight every month. There's a back catalogue now of about 15 that you'll get access to for $1, plus a new one every month. $5 gets you early access by a day to all the movie review episodes, and it gives you the right to vote on an episode once per month as well. So go and have a look. The vote for this month is up right now, so patrons at $5 and up, make sure you go and vote. But go and have a look at all that stuff and rate us on Apple Podcasts. That also helps a lot. Give us 5 stars, all that jazz. But that is us. I can tell you as well that the top 10 movies of the year, not genre specific, between myself, Matt, and Connor, is also coming soon. So look forward to that epic in the next little while. But this has been our top 10 of 2019, with Lighthouse taking the victory and taking the prize home. So, his question: do you remember what won last year, Tim?
Let me see. Jeez, feels so long ago at this point. Would it have been Hereditary in 2018?
I'm fairly certain it was Mandy.
Oh, okay, that sounds right.
I think it was Mandy, but I mean, you could wow me and say, no, it was actually this thing or whatever. Obviously Hereditary was high. Hell, Ari Aster might have had number 2 years in a row. that he may have literally got the number 2 slot twice. So no, that's cool. And then do you know what 2017 was?
No idea.
No idea was.
I guess would that have been, was Get Out 2017?
Get Out was 2017.
Okay.
We may have had that at number 1. I can't remember. I can't remember. We probably did, because I had split, I think, slightly higher, but I feel like you would have argued Get Out higher. I mean, we can go back and check. People can go back and watch that video and find out what we put. Just curious to check in these situations. But no, cool. I don't think we did one for 2015, but it follows with a 1, just FYI. Just putting that out there. For sure. All right. So thank you very much for joining us, for watching. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and hopefully here we'll get a good 2020 and get some big horror to be proud of and be excited about, that we'll be excited to fill up a top 10 with no reservations, without any let's add this one or that one on to make it up to a 10. No, let's hope that we can fill a top 10 next March without any compromises. So there we go. So thank you once again. Keep watching scary movies, guys. We will see you next time.